Gringo Gone Wild. I'm Rusty Johnson. In all the episodes up to now, I talked about my past working with the animals, growing up with wildlife and adventure, as well as going through Africa. But one of my greatest life-changing moments was when I started going to the Amazon. And what made it so life-changing is that I did a good 20 years of having lots of different experiences. And when you do that, you kind of get set in your ways, or you have certain types of beliefs. When I went down to the Amazon, the more my beliefs were challenged. And that's the beauty of the Amazon. It's so topsy-turvy that any normal type of belief that you have sometimes can be thrown out the window just by being down there. And that's what I learned over and over again through the last 20 years. So many things that I believed when I first started going to the Amazon, or just ways I felt or points of view I had, have totally changed since then, even 180. So I'll talk about those in many of my podcasts to go. But this first wonderful adventure, I just fell in love with as soon as it happened to me. I do have to put a disclaimer on it. This was extremely mind-blowing to me. This was a weekend I had in the jungle that had so many dramatic things happen that for the longest time, I really didn't talk about it with anyone. Even when I would explain it to some of my loved ones, they even looked at me like I have just went crazy. Things that happened to me, I felt that would never happen to me. So I kind of stuck in my back pocket for a while. It took a long, long time of processing it. And after a while, I realized, no, I'm not nuts. This really did happen to me, and I want to share it with the world. So what you're about to hear is just how it happened, and that's all I can say. Towards the end, you may say, man, Rusty's getting a little nutty here, but it's the truth. This really did happen. After having 20 years of being in there, the adventures pile up each time. There's like 3 or 4 or 5 different adventures each time I go. But this was kind of the most intense physically and mentally. It was borderline stupid in the beginning. What I thought originally was selfish, but then towards the end of it, it all came together and came to reason. At first, it seemed to come out of, I don't want to say greed, but it was very self-centered of me. There was something that I wanted to do. I felt it became an obsession. It was very, very high risk, where a lot of people could be killed, but I had this obsession that it needed to be done. Later on, as time passed, it all came to light that it wasn't an obsession. There's I don't want to say exactly logical reasons, but there was reasons for why I did it. It has absolutely changed my life. Really, the way that it started was, before the Amazon ever became a part of me, snakes were my passion from day one. I got my first snake when I was 6 years old. Between the age of 6 years old all the way up to, even in my teens, God bless my mother, she allowed me to have cobras in the house, vipers. I had 200-pound snakes that would literally escape, and they would be bound and sleeping inside our sofa for 3 months. So snakes were always a very strong influence upon me. At that point, 18 years or so of being in the Amazon, the first 10 years was really strictly wildlife and guiding. I had a few instances through the years where I gotten sick, and shamans have healed me with the natural medicines of the Amazon. So it really piqued my interest, and I learned as I went along a lot about the medicines. I met my fiancée, Fabiola, who was third generation curandero, which is kind of their version of a shaman down there. But then when I met Fabiola, it was like crash course, learning about a lot of medicines very quickly. Focusing first mostly on Cambo, which is the excretion from the waxing monkey frog, which is fantastic for many diseases. I've actually cured hepatitis C with it. It's also considered the vaccine of the rainforest that raises your immunity. There's absolutely countless benefits to it, and that will be a totally other book. And second to that was ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is a drink that's made from 2 different plants. One is the vine of the capi vine, and the other is a leaf called chacruna leaf. These are boiled together for 3 days and reduced to where you take a shot glass of it, and it's an amazing experience. It's a journey to another land. Ayahuasca called the vine of the dead, and it kind of brings you to the land of the dead while you're under the influence of it, which is DMT based, which we all have DMT in our body. So I was learning a lot about ayahuasca at the time through Fabiola, and of course other plants for mild ailments as well. There was always something that I heard, that there was very, very few people in the jungle who have had experience with what's called Viper medicine. And what that is using the venom from two different types of snakes. The fer-de-lance viper, which their native name is Hergon, and the Bushmaster Viper, his native name is Shushupi. They would extract the venom and then somehow, which is the big deep secret, is diluting it with certain types of plants that basically weaken the strength enough to where a human could take it. And what you would do is actually take a vine and burn just the 2 layers of skin with a burning vine, and then you put the drop of the venom on that burn, and then it's absorbed through the lymphatic system. And what it's meant to do is it kills any pathogen that's in your bloodstream. It also removes abnormal blood cells, which then really just kind of kicks your body into creating new blood. So it's almost a blood transfusion in a way. And reverses the age process. I've heard amazing stories about it, of killing HIV and cancer. So I was extremely interested in this. As time went by, it just got more and more. My first experience ever with ayahuasca, when I threw up, which is very typical, where I threw up in the bowl and the entire bowl was intertwined with vipers, and they were like spitting and snapping at me. But the odd part of it is I wasn't afraid. It was almost they were trying to take something negative out of me. Like their aggression wasn't directed towards me, I felt. And then when that would happen, I literally would purge even more. So I saw vipers during my first ayahuasca experience and really just thought it was just a typical thing. Because at the same time, I had a big viper that just would quickly show up and go right down my throat. And I could feel it in my stomach, then would come out. It would make me yawn to where it felt like my jaw was going to break. To where I opened my mouth so far, and then suddenly, it felt like CGI. This viper would go down into my stomach. I just chalked it up as if the spirit of the medicine was kind of checking me out and almost giving me a physical, because I also had a bad stomach problem at the time because of being in the jungle, kind of a dysentery type thing, which then afterwards was gone the following morning. So that's as far as I left it. And as time passed, I was still having this obsession with these snakes. So when I returned to the Amazon, I said, you know what, this is going to be the time. I'm going to catch one of these, milk the venom, and I'm going to find out and look for shamans that are going to tell me how to do this. So that was my plan. First went out to areas where the Shushupis, the Bushmaster, was really something I was attracted to more. I really don't know why. They're far more scary than the fer-de-lance. Fer-de-lance is only about 3 feet. It can get a little bit bigger, but on average it'd be about 3 feet. Most people are killed by fer-de-lance because they live along the river's edge eating amphibians. And that's where you get the children playing. That's where you have ladies washing laundry. And it's just more conflict between humans and the snake. So most people do get bit by the fer-de-lance. And I've had several friends dead from snake bites. But the Bushmaster is far more dangerous and, I want to say, potent. The venom itself is not as potent as the fer-de-lance. It's just when you get bit, they give you 3 times as much as the fer-de-lance would. Let's say if you got to have a half of a gram of venom in a bite from a fer-de-lance, you'll get 2.5 grams of venom from a bite of a Bushmaster. Here's something that I learned that was kind of really terrified me in a way, but intrigued me, but also gave me the mixed feelings of putting other people in danger while doing this, is I was told that if for some reason you were sitting in an emergency room with a bottle of anti-venom next to you and a Bushmaster came in and bit you, you still had an 80% chance of dying. So this was absolutely an animal that was no joke. And Joseus, my right-hand man down there, he's terrified of him. When I was filming Hotel Amazon, we were milking a Bushmaster for the show, and even him being one of the top guides in the country, he made sure he put a lot of space between him and this snake. Later on, I asked him why, because I was holding it, and I had it in my hands, and this guy, who was really a huge mentor to me while being in the jungle, was just like 20 foot away, standing behind the table and shooting photos with a telephoto lens. Then I found out why. When he was a little kid, his uncle was going out hunting and never returned that evening. Now that can be common, because even for someone who's born and raised in the jungle, it is so dense and confusing to travel there that even the best of the best will get turned around and get lost. But it's no huge emergency. What they usually do is they set up camp for the evening. They sleep through the night in the jungle. In the morning when the sun rises, they can read the sun and they can find their way back home. That was common, so they waited. The next morning, uncle did not come back. So they set out a search party, and Joseas was one of them. And they went to the typical places where they knew that he hunted. And they found him flat on his back. And what was so eerie about it was that he had a shotgun with him. He had a machete with him. And he's laying there on his back dead. And a 10-foot Bushmaster was coiled up on his chest. It's like sleeping. They're nocturnal. So it was sleeping on his chest. And he was bit 6 times. So not only was this experienced jungle guy, hunter, out there with 2 weapons, he was bit 6 times before he could get a shot off or get a swing of a machete and dead. Especially being that Joseas was young at the time. I believe he was about 10 years old when that happened. That really burned in his mind, that memory. Of course, I think it would with anybody. From then on, he's always been afraid of him, which is called being intelligent. I had a huge respect for them. I knew their capabilities. There's no reason to wear snake-proof boots. When a snake is so big it can bite you in the hip or in the chest, what's a pair of snake-proof boots going to do for you? This is an animal that's almost mythical. They typically have 4 fangs, 2 on each side. As well as 4 fangs, they actually have a spiny barb on the tip of the tail that they actually try to lance you with. Now down there they say it's poisonous, but it's not. You know, imagine getting bit and then getting stabbed at the same time while he's biting you with his tail. So it's very much of a mythical creature. Even though I would have caught either one, the Colonel Lance or the Bushmaster, I was really shooting for the Bushmaster. So the first 3 or 4 times, we didn't find anything. Literally, in 3 nights, all we found was a giant bird-eating spider. No snakes, not even boas. We crapped out. It was like every animal took a vacation. We didn't see practically anything those days. So then they said, okay, well, you know what? Let's ask around and put the word out with people who spend a lot of time in the jungle and pay them to catch one if they see one. So I went all around the different areas that I know the jungle. I said, listen, I'm looking for a Bushmaster. I'll pay you to catch one. And they all say, yeah, sure. You know what? I should have one 3 or 4 days. Yes. That's something I actually found with the jungle people. They're very nice, accommodating people, and they don't want to say no. So they say yes, but they never show up with anything. So time was passing by, and I'm making phone calls to these people, or I'm visiting them in their village and saying, you know, hey, I haven't found it. So finally I said, you know what, we're still going to have to find it ourselves. Now, there's 2 sides to this, because not only did I have to get the venom, but I had to find someone who knew how to work with the venom. So while I had these guys going out looking for the snakes, I was looking for the shamans that worked with them. And that was an interesting adventure in itself, because you would meet people who claim that they're shamans, but they're really not. Some would say, oh, yeah, I know how to do this. I'll show it to you for $6,000. So I'd ask them a few snake questions, since that was kind of my forte for many years, and I quickly knew they had no clue what they were talking about, and I'd probably be killed if I tried to learn through them. So I found more charlatans and people who wanted to exploit me than teach me. I said, all right, well, 1 step at a time now. Let's find some venom first. I went to my shaman and told him what I was looking to do. And he said, you know what? He says, there's a guy way off into the jungle. He's a hunter. All he does, he lives on this big property that his family's owned for generations. It's a big jungle property. He goes from 6 at night to 6 in the morning and hunts. But he mostly hunts for wild boar. And then he brings the food to the market. And then he comes home and hunts more. That's his life. This guy is the real deal. He says he knows his area like the back of his hand. If anybody can find a Bushmaster, it's going to be him. And I knew a Bushmaster bit his dog a few weeks ago and killed it. So I know there is a Bushmaster there. So I said, let's set it up and we'll go. So he said, okay. I put word out to him. It's kind of like the Pony Express. They tell someone who's going to one village, and then they pass the message along to the other village. And finally, within a few days, it got to him that we were interested. And then it got back. He said, okay, meet me up there. In a week, we waited along my shaman's place, where is my healing center where I bring tourists. And I have a small little house that sits right on a lake in the middle of the jungle. So we just had a week of just relaxing and hanging out. And what was pretty funny was that every single night it rained. And I loved it. Major thunderstorms. Fabi and I would actually because it was hot as hell, man. So we would canoe in the lake in this major thunderstorm. It was surreal. At nighttime, it was perfect sleeping weather with the rain falling down. I loved it. Every day I prayed for this rain. All week it rained. So the day comes and we're leaving to go to this hunter's property. So we travel by motor car, and a motor car is basically a motorcycle trike with a love seat in the back. And we pack all our camping gear, because it's going to take a few days to go through this process. So pack all our gear on top of the motor car, in the back of the motor car, and we all get in there, and I'm psyched. I'm like, okay, here we go. We're going to go and get this Bushmaster, and we take off, and we're taking off down the road, and we start to go down a hill, and I look down the hill, and all I see is mud and water throughout the entire clay road. And we get to the bottom of the hill, and the motor car gets stuck in the mud and the water. From the rain I was praying for the last week, now is soaked up in this clay road. It was so bad, we literally had to get out of the motor car and push it by hand for roughly 15 miles in noon Amazon sun. I literally thought I was going to die. Up to her knees in this mud. The mud covered the wheels of this machine. And we were just pushing. We would go 50, you hop in again and go 50, 60 yards, and then boom, stop again. Have to push again. Sometimes lift it and push it. Meanwhile, you're getting sunburned, you're getting covered in mud, you're getting your legs caught underneath the wheels, getting run over. It was absolutely horrible and nonstop. I was going to almost quit. I was going to just tell everybody, screw this, let's just go back. But my shaman and his brother, who was the motor car driver, they were sitting there smiling the whole time and pushing it and getting in and getting stuck and then pushing it and getting in and getting stuck and smiling. You could see there was no sense of giving up for them. It was just their everyday life is what it was like. And that really kicked me into gear, saying, all right, Rusty, suck it up. You got to work for what you want. And so I just followed suit on them. I'm like, you know what? I'm not giving up. I'll give up the moment they give up. So kept on pushing and you know, we get a little dry spot, and then suddenly you'd think it was over, and then bam, back in the mud again. So it took hours and hours. Finally, it's a dead-end road, right to the jungle. So we finally get down there. There's a small stream that we kind of jump into and wipe the mud off us and change into fresh clothes. And that was only half of the trip. Now we got to go on foot. The Bushmaster lives up in terra firma, which is the firm ground, higher altitude type of habitat. Not down by the water like the Fer-de-Lance does. So we get all packed up, everything on all our backs, and we start bushwhacking through the jungle with machetes. It was pretty insane. It was so deep in. This is like what I call a no tourist zone. With all the tourists I bring down to guide, I have certain, what I'd say, tourist-friendly areas that give you an idea of what really the Amazon is, but it's much more user-friendly. This wasn't. It was hardcore. Hardcore heat, hardcore mud. But the odd part is you're in the middle of the jungle, and suddenly you would just see a hut in the middle of the jungle. An old man sitting in the hut. I came across one, and this guy collected butterflies. He had a little platform of fruit all over top of it, and every butterfly in the jungle seemed to gravitate to this fruit pile and eat. And he would just collect these. Some of these butterflies had 4 or 5 inch wingspans. Cobalt blue, they're called blue morphos. But he's in the middle of nowhere. That's his life. Very, very interesting. And then we say hi, hang out for a bit, and pay our respects to him and the old man, and move on. Keep on walking. And this is up terra firma, so now instead of sloshing through the mud, we're going through dense jungle, but it's hills. And every time you get up a hill, you're halfway down until you go up another one. There's no path. You literally need to walk from root to root. And if you miss any of the roots, you're falling down to the bottom. But with everything on your back, bedrolls on your back, food on your back, all my snake catching equipment on my back, it was tough going. And you're sweating, profusely. It's like you jumped in a pool. Is how wet you get with sweating in such an environment of not only the heat but the humidity, and in the denseness of the jungle. There's no wind or ventilation or no breeze, so it just makes it that much more even claustrophobic in a way. So after about 2 hours, 2.5 hours of bushwhacking, there's this hill that looks like a wall, straight up, and you're just zigzagging along routes, one route to the other, and as soon as we get to the top, it was like, boom, thank God, all of a sudden, it opens up to a small little platform with a palm leaf top, and you see a farm of yucca, and that was our headquarters. So we get there and we meet the hunter. The guy's probably about his mid-50s, pretty soft-spoken. And his house is very simple. It literally is a platform about 2 foot off the ground, made with what they call iron palm. They're strips of palm wood. And when you walk on it, you flex and you constantly think you're going to fall through it, but you don't. Then he had a little loft, and it was pretty interesting. It was a little loft on the roof area in the corner of the hut, but the stairs were simply a thin log with just wedges cut out of the log to get up into the loft. So I asked Fabi, I said, why does he just build stairs or a ladder up to the loft? Why is it just a log with just little wedges cut out? And she says, because the jaguars can't climb that. Once we ended up setting up all our gear in the hut, the sun was just still really brutal. I was muddy and sweaty. So the hunter said, just go down past the farm and there's a small river that you can bathe there. So we grabbed a change of clothes and Fabi and I went down there to take a bath. And I mean, this property was so gorgeous. But one thing that I noticed was the animals that were around. They're the small ones, the type of animals that he didn't hunt. You could tell he was really connected to them. It seemed like he was the only one that has been on this property for like 2 generations or something, because when Fabi and I got down to the stream, there was a fallen tree across the stream, and that's what you stood on, and it was a spring-fed stream. You could literally see right below the tree, you could see the water bubbling up, and it was freezing cold, man. But all the like smaller birds, the hummingbirds, smaller passerine birds, looked at us and didn't recognize us and literally were flying close to see who we were. Because really nobody's been on this property except for this hunt, which I think they've seen him every day. But when we showed up, they literally were like, who the hell are you? And I had like 2 or 3 hummingbirds that just like hovered right in front of my nose. Just like it was surreal. Just hovering in front of my nose, looking at me like, "Who the hell are you? Never seen you before." And the fish, there was piranha in the stream, as well as many other different types of fish, and they swam right over to the log. Because of the hours of being out in the sun and exerting ourselves, pushing that motor car through the mud, bushwhacking through the jungle, this water was so cold that if you just took a bucket and poured it over your head, you'd have a heart attack. Literally, Fabi had to scoop up the water and first pour a little over my feet, then a little bit over my shins, and then a little bit over my knees, and work her way up to the top of my head to let my body acclimate. The hunter purposely dropped that tree right in that area so he would have the coldest water. It literally was laid right over the spring. And again, the animals would just come around because they didn't recognize us. And that's when I knew this is true virgin forest. And if a Bushmaster was going to be anywhere, it's going to be here. So after we cooled off, bathed and changed, went back up and hung out in the hammock. I was talking to the hunter. He was telling us, just recently a Bushmaster killed his one dog. He had a jaguar kill his other dog right in front of him. As much as I felt sad for everything, I just enjoyed being in this virgin rainforest where you had no neighbors and it was purely wild and untouched by humans. But then that's when I started getting second thoughts as well. I had this guilt trip because everybody was here because I came up with this idea. A lot of my ideas are not the greatest ideas in the world. And so I'm sitting here in this hut while we're hanging out waiting for darkness thinking, man, this is all on me. Every person here, they're all doing this for me. If someone even just falls and breaks a leg during our hike at night, God forbid somebody gets bit and dies. If you get bit where we were, you're dead. Because even at that point, we were probably 5 hours away from any clinic that could possibly give you antivenom. And it was a better chance they wouldn't have the antivenom anyway. So you were going to die if you got bit. Just for this obsession, I could possibly kill my wife, possibly kill my shaman, the shaman's brother, as well as this hunter. And I'm thinking, why? Just because I wanted some of the venom? But then there was something that overtook me that said, just do it. This is something you need to do. So I just kept on going along with it. And so we hung around the hut till it got dark. And once it got dark, we packed up all our gear. And I had a big bag. I figured if I catch one, I'd throw it in the bag and bring it to my home in the jungle. And I had a snake stick, about 3 foot long. So in my mind, I figured it was pretty simple. We'll catch a young Bushmaster. They're the most common. Milk it and throw it in the bag and go home. Well, it didn't work out that way at all. As soon as it got dark, probably about 10 o'clock at night, we waited 10 or 11, and we started out on the hike, which took 2 hours. I'm talking 2 hours of hoofing it. These jungle people, the way that they move throughout the forest is incredible, perfectly adapted for it. If you look at their feet, you will actually see their feet are wider than a white man's feet because of growing up in soft, round, muddy areas. So we started heading out to where he last saw Bushmaster, and then we're looking for them along the way. We start hoofing along, and my shaman, the brother, and the hunter, these guys just breeze through the forest like they're walking down a sidewalk. I mean, I'm talking fast. So I'm trying to carry a camera. In my backpack, I have my snake catching equipment as well as a machete, and just really trying to keep up with them. We heard some owls. The place was screaming with life. You didn't see it, but you felt it. You could hear it. The place was just buzzing with life. Sometimes, even you're next to one another, you had to speak extra loud to speak over the insects, to speak over the frogs. And I think we'd see a lot more animals if we weren't almost on a dead run through the place. But I obviously had to keep up because there was no way I'd find my way back home at this point. So I was the number 2 guy in line. The way it was the hunter was in front of me. There was me. Fabi was behind me. The shaman was behind her, and brother was kind of taking up the back. You keep an eye on the jaguars because they're sneaky, so they kind of sneak up on you from behind or from up top in a tree. After about an hour and a half, 45 minutes of walking through this tiny, very thin deer trail. And when you think deer, it's not a North American deer that's 6 foot tall. The deer here are like 3 feet tall. They're tiny as can be. There's this tiny deer trail we're walking along and bushwhacking through. And next thing I know, I hear the hunter. He kind of does a little yelp and a jump. And I look, and this Bushmaster darts out of the wood, goes right between his legs, and takes off down the path. And he steps aside from me, and I go running after. I have the snake stick in my hand. And while I'm running after it for about just 5-6 meters, I notice this damn thing is 9 foot long. It's gigantic. Head about almost the size of my fist.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of my podcast titled Ayahuasca and My Spirit Guide. Part 2 and 3 are all ready for you, and enjoy.